Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddha Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bhartataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you for joining us again. We're continuing. We only covered one verse of chapter 18. And it's just a very brief review before we continue into verse 2. And it's going to be a lot of commentary from Shankaracharya, Jnaneshwar, and a more recent sannyasi who died about 40 years ago. And his name is Swami Chidbhavananda. So, to begin with the review, Arjuna wanted to know the difference between sannyasa, meaning formal renunciation, and Thiaga, which means relinquishment of something. Because Krishna had used these two terms in the teaching of the previous chapters. Semantically, these words have very similar meanings: to discard, to give up, to renounce, etc. But due to that ambiguity, Arjuna wants to know if they are the same thing or different. Krishna's view is going to be that they are indeed the same. There's no difference between sannyasa and Thiaga, according to Krishna. Even in the Upanishads, they are often treated like synonyms, which shows that the Vedas use Thiaga and sannyasa in a very similar connotation. But before expressing his own opinion, Krishna will present the views of others, which is that there is a subtle difference between these two. And what is that difference? We will find out now, because we're just going to jump into verse 2 now. As usual, we will chant the words little by little, and then we'll chant together. Sri Bhagavan Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha. Now together slowly. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam kavayo viduhu sarva karma palatyagam prahustyagam vichakshanaha. The meaning, I only changed it a little bit. The Blessed Lord said, the wise understand the renunciation of desire-driven actions as sannyasa and declare the abandonment of the fruit of action as Thiaga. Not much difference, but at least that's what I felt the original meant. Jnaneshwar, actually this verse I don't have any quotes from Shankaracharya, but Jnaneshwar and Swami Chidbhavananda will be interesting. As Krishna, Jnaneshwar says, explaining what others say, actions prompted by strong desires means things like Ashwamedha Yajna. If you're from India, you might know Ashwamedha Yajna, you've heard that word. They offer so many horses, and they're trying to get to heaven, basically, the person conducting that yajna, that ceremony. Or they may do something like construct a well, give grants of land and villages, or making a display of diverse vows and austerities. All these things, are typically done in the ancient times, the Bhagavad Gita times, because they want to go to heaven or something, become Indra or be more powerful, etc. So he says, such actions prompted by strong desires, all such desire-driven actions bind the doer and force them to experience their fruit. And he also says, one cannot be free unless he pays off all his debts. In other words, you can't be arrogant and do a ceremony and not pay for your arrogance. And the modern American version would be, you might be able to fool other people, but you can't fool God. So it's pretty simple. And then he goes on to say that since desire-motivated action creates bondage, one who seeks moksha, liberation, should not fancy it, not even for fun, he says. Literally. Such a fruit-motivated action should be vomited out as if it were poison. Such relinquishment is called renunciation or sannyasa, said Lord Krishna. And then he goes on, speaking on Krishna's behalf. Even though the fruit of these day-to-day and occasional actions is so great, like every day doing archana or every day doing some kind of fasting or reading the scriptures or occasionally giving gifts to somebody or just doing the rites for your ancestors and all these things. Some people, he is saying, say that even those should be relinquished and treated as nauseous and truly fit to be abandoned as vomit. Okay? It's pretty extreme. Such abandonment of the results of actions is called relinquishment or Thiaga by some people. It is only when renunciation is followed that the fruit-motivated actions do not fetter the doer. In other words, if you take sannyasa and you're not doing these things, it's okay. It's not going to bind you, right? So, then the next he says, actions that have been prohibited, like stealing, killing, these kind of things, those deserve in themselves to be abandoned. When the head is rolled, the trunk automatically follows suit. So in other words, if you head is the symbol of your decision to relinquish the fruits. And if the head says, I'm not going to take the fruits of my actions, then the body, which represents the actual, rights and all those actions, those also will eventually be deflected, and that karma won't come back to you. That's the idea. In that way, with the relinquishment of the actions results, the day-to-day and other actions become as though not performed at all. And then he continues to say, those who in such ways follow both relinquishment, which is sannyasa, and renunciation, which is Thiaga, secure the very means of attaining knowledge of the Supreme Self. He's saying there are people who believe that if you do both of these, you're going to go towards knowledge of the Supreme Self. But for those who follow relinquishment haphazardly, they secure no relinquishment at all, but only get entangled in actions all the more. Then we will turn to this commentary of Swami Chidbhavananda, who has some really good gems. This time I want to share those with you. He says, he died in 1985. Kamya karma, or desire-ridden actions, require clarification, definitely. Hankering after health, wealth, long life, progeny, name, fame, titles, social status, all these come under kamya karma. That means desire-ridden actions. Under this category also comes the hope for various heavenly enjoyments after death. So there are some people who want to martyr themselves so that they can go to heaven and have lots of women or something like that. They all fall in that. Even though it can be connected with some kind of religious belief, it's not actually pure because your selfishness is there. In the view of some sages, sannyasa means to renounce all these desires. There are others who claim that it is Thiaga to abandon just the fruits of actions, such as daily obligatory rites or the occasional specific ones. So, typically in the time of Bhagavad Gita, people would do Sandhya Vandanam. If you're Indian, you know what that is, but it means that every evening you go out and you do your ritual bath at the end of the day. And also, that's an example of a daily rite. There are others too. For us, it would be like Archana, Ayam, etc. And then the occasional specific ones would be like when you have a baby or somebody dies in the family, you have to do things, but not every day. So these kamya karmas, the selfish ones, are those that create new bondage leading to rebirths for the fulfillment of desires that prompted those actions. Seeds for further transmigrations should not be sown by those aspirants who are intent on gaining liberation. Obviously, because you want to be free from it. So if you say, I'm going to get liberation and I want a BMW, oh, look at that chocolate cake, maybe I'll have it tomorrow, So it's like they're going in two different directions. When a person has no interest in the fruits of various actions, that attitude is Thiaga, which prepares the sadhak for liberation. Sadhak means the seeker. This is the view of a second set of sages. There's different groups, and they get a little bit intermingled here, but we're going to, in a few verses, we're going to realize what Krishna's standpoint is, which is the same as Amma. So this won't be so important after that. And Sri Ramakrishna Deva once said, seekers endowed with sattva guna, with purity, need not do any of these rites. They don't have to do anything at all. In fact, all activities drop off from them of their own accord. Any endeavor on their part to retain rites proves itself futile. Like you want to do these things, but just the way circumstances prevent it. And that's just the universe is arranging it that way. The Lord Himself releases them from all duties. And then he has a simile. The domestic activities of a pregnant woman are reduced as her pregnancy advances. After delivery, she has no work except looking after the baby. Such is the case with those imbued with purity, sattva. But others who are not sattvic should necessarily engage themselves in their allotted duties. As the servant of a rich person does the work assigned to him, The devotees of the Lord should discharge their duties, holding them all as the mandate of the Creator. Let's say you want to be a musician, but you just don't have the voice for it, or whatever, there's some obstacle. Then if you're good at something else, that's what you do, because it seems to be natural. Mantra japa should be repeated mentally while the activities are going on at the physical level, and at the appointed times, meditation on the Lord can be practiced. This is the gist of karma yoga, and already this is what we're doing in all of Amma's ashrams and centers. So it's nice, somebody who lived 100 years ago already was thinking of what Amma is telling us to do. Not that we need that corroboration, but he is also considered to be somewhat of an avatar. Instead of answering directly, this is now just the commentaries over, I'm adding some things to that. Instead of answering directly, Krishna initially gives the opinions of other people in this verse and the following one. This indicates that different views do exist, and Krishna will give his own verdict later, and that'll be from verse 4. Now, incidentally, Krishna is not going to differentiate Thiaga and Sannyasa, because in his view, they mean the same thing, which is renunciation. It's like sometimes you ask Amma a question, and she doesn't answer your question because it's a wrong question. And she's going to start talking about something else, and you're like, that's not my question. But actually, it's exactly what we need to hear. And this is what a realized being may do. So don't think that she didn't understand your question. It just means that maybe our question was a little bit off base, and she's bringing it back to the real core. So for Krishna, they are synonyms, Thiaga and Sannyasa. But there are some others who make certain subtle differences between the two, as the commentaries have explained and will explain more in the next verse. Certain sages consider sannyasa to be the giving up of all desire-prompted actions. That's one thing. In many cases, people may do pujas to get name and fame or karmic merit, which they think they will get them to heaven. And to be especially clear, let us look at the 5 categories of actions. Traditionally, this refers to like rights and some kind of duties a householder has as a matter of course, every day, occasionally, and so on. So the first one is called Nitya Karma. Nitya Karma means like constant rights or constant actions. And like I said, the ones that are familiar to Indians and some others would be Sandhya Vandanam, the evening bath, Shraddha, which means offering your, chanting or water to your ancestors. And for Amma's devotees, we can think of it as Archana, something like I am technique, the white flower meditation, or just Amma's daily live stream. So these are things that we feel are our duties as seekers every day. It's not like you do it one day and not the other day. The second category is Naimitika Karma. It means occasional rights and duties that we have to perform. It's not on a daily basis, but occasionally, but still compulsory. It would be like before and after a childbirth, like starting education, learning how to write the letters of their language. This is formalized, as you may have seen Amma doing for the kids when they're starting. And also the first food. These things are all, they're, traditions, and they're considered to be necessary, but you don't do it every day. You don't have a baby every day, etc. And someone may die in the family. Well, people don't die every day, but it still has to be done. And the third category is Kamya Karma. We talked about that already. It's not compulsory. It's usually selfish, and that's basically the definition of it. It's for me. But even though it's not compulsory, the mind wants to make it so. Like, I cannot do meditation, but I'm definitely going to eat such and so, or I'm definitely going to take a nap, or whatever it is. The mind tries to bully us into doing these things and forget the things that we really should be doing. So either through personal efforts or through a puja, or if we just want more money, or if we just want a bigger house or something like that, it's not just practical. It's a little bit of a greed, a little bit of self-centeredness, selfishness. So these are called desire-driven actions. That's the third category. The fourth category is Nishiddha Karma, which are absolutely prohibited actions like hurting others, lying, stealing, etc. All the bad things that basically most countries forbid legally anyhow. That's the fourth category. Fifth is Prayaschitta Karma, which it means it's things like fasting or observing silence. Basically, actions done to atone for doing the wrong thing or not doing the right thing. This doesn't count as a sadhana, actually, because it is done for the purpose of reducing the bad things we've done or the mistakes we've made. If we do it just for spiritual growth, it becomes kind of a different category and an even better category, but it doesn't fall into the content that we're talking about now. Because it's about relinquishing things, right? And you shouldn't relinquish sadhana, that's for sure. So out of all these actions, which ones should we renounce? Certainly the selfish ones, the kamya karma, and of course nishiddha ones, the ones that are bad, that are forbidden usually legally. And we should not renounce the first two and the last. The daily routines and rituals we should continue. The occasional rites and rituals and necessities we have to do. And if we have done something wrong and we feel guilty about it, we can certainly take a day of fasting or maunam, silence. These are all good things. And according to some people, this definition is called sannyasa. It's a version of sannyasa, not the one that where you get these red robes and everything, but it is a form of sannyasa. And what is Thiaga? In this verse, Krishna says, wise people declare the abandonment of the fruit of action as Thiaga. So you can have two people do the same thing. One person is abandoning or relinquishing the fruits. The other person is only motivated by the fruits. So you can't tell on the surface, that's the difference. So in the case of sannyasa, it is karma Thiaga. And in the case of Thiaga, it is karma phala Thiaga. So sannyasa, in this definition that we're hearing about in this one verse, is that sannyasa, it just means you don't do certain things. And then some people say, the same group of people say, well, Thiaga is just about the fruits of your actions. So you can not do things and you can also not want the results of your actions. And there's no fruit to this prayaschittam actions, which is kind of, we would say, we're atoning for our sins in a Christian way. Those don't have any karmic repercussions because they're there to take away the mistakes or reduce the wrong things we've done. It doesn't have any other effect other than that. And since the selfish and prohibited actions were already mentioned as to be renounced, abandoning the fruit of all actions refers only to the fruit of daily and occasional karmas. You may do them every day or occasionally when necessarily, but not for you to get something out of it. It's just because it's your duty. You're doing it and then it's done. And you're not thinking, okay, when am I going to get my son, or when am I going to get a better job? It's just done, because that's what human beings do. They're supposed to do these things. Thus, Thiaga is simply not expecting any personal benefit from any of these things. And we will find out what some other people say about sannyasa and Thiaga in verse 3. Tyajam doshavad ityeke karma prahur manishinaha yajnadana tapa karma natyajam iti chapare. Now together, slowly. Tyajam doshavadityeke karma prahur manishanaha yajna dana tapa karma natyajam iti chapare. Some wise people declare that actions are detrimental and should therefore be relinquished, while others say that the acts of sacrifice, charity, and austerity should not be shunned. Sacrifice, charity, and austerity means yajna, dana, and tapas. So what I changed is just the gender specificity. I made it to people. And the word all doesn't actually come in the verse, though it comes in Shankaracharya's commentary, which is why our book probably has it there. And this word evil is dosha. Dosha, not the dosha that you eat, that's dosha. This is dosha. And it has many, many meanings. But I think in today's world, just saying it's touched by evil is just too weird for modern day Westerners. So the real meaning is simply that it's detrimental in some way. And then we have to figure out in what way is it detrimental, because that is something that we would be concerned about. But if someone throws the evil word at you, you're like, wait a second, according to whom, you know? So instead of whilst, a little more common, modern English, while. This person probably wrote this based on some of the older translations of these verses, which are kind of antiquated. So Shankaracharya's commentary, he wants to clarify wise people. He says that means learned people who follow Vedanta. So it's not that they're just a scholar, it means that they follow the philosophy of non-dualism, which is very important for the Bhagavad Gita, because without that, there's no Bhagavad Gita. And they declare that, such and so, he says that, that's where he says, all action. So the all that I scratched from the text in my mind is coming from the Shankaracharya commentary. He says, all action as being productive of bondage. So in other means everything. If you're attached to it, it's going to create karmic bondage, and we don't want that. And he says it is detrimental because negative qualities are inherent therein, like attachment, etc. Yeah, when you think about it, most of the things we do, we get identified with it, and then we get attached to it. So if that's the norm for us, it's better to do less things than more. But seva's okay because it's not for you personally. So that's okay. That's why ashrams are really helpful, because most of the things you do in an ashram are not for you personally. And on this same subject, Krishna says, others say that the acts of yajna-dana and tapas should not be given up. Okay. Shankaracharya basically says that this refers to normal people, and he says it doesn't apply to sannyasins, because the idea is that sannyasins have already renounced all these things. It may or may not be true, but this is a very old text. And Shankaracharya again was at least 1200 years ago, so it just doesn't apply to these people, because of course they're doing this. Whether they are or not, that's a different question in today's world. Then he continues about non-sannyasis, saying, For them, there is the possibility of abandoning action out of delusion and the fear of physical difficulty. Thus, they are reproached as relinquishers of the tamasic and rajasic classes. I guess this is, and there must have been some people who were fake swamis or fake sannyasis, and this is a good reason for them to put this as a little like appendix to the earlier statement, saying that there are people who are, doing it for the wrong reasons, and so we call them tamasic relinquishers or tamasic sannyasis or rajasic sannyasis. And that's going to come up in verse 7 and 8, not tonight. Whatever it is, it doesn't sound very good, right? And in contrast, Shankaracharya cites verses from the Gita. You can look at them later, chapter 12, verses 16, 19, 22 through 26. And he says, on the other hand, the true sannyasin has been distinguished as one who has renounced all undertakings, who is silent, content with anything, homeless, steady-minded, and characterized by the marks indicative of having gone beyond the gunas, beyond sattva, rajas, and tamas. And the Lord will hereafter describe the true sannyasin state as that supreme consummation of knowledge. That's later in this chapter. So his commentary continues. Therefore, it is not those devoted to wisdom, the sannyasis, who are under consideration here. It is only the abandonment of the fruits of action by virtue of its being the sattvic nature, which is spoken of as sannyasa. So, forget about the sannyasis that are wearing red robes. We're talking about people who are not sannyasis, but kind of live like one. And that's what he's getting at, because he wants to tell Arjuna, you don't need the red robes to be a sannyasi. I'm going to tell you how to be a sannyasi right where you are now with your 4 wives and 4 sons. Some statements in the Gita are for the purpose of eulogizing the abandonment of the fruit of action. This is like Krishna has to go through this just to sell this to Arjuna. Like in chapter 12, verse 12, on renouncing, peace immediately follows. Sounds like, okay, I'm going to renounce. No, it's only praise of the abandonment of the fruits of action. That's the real meaning. It is a precept to Arjuna who could not practice the various alternatives previously referred to and who was not possessed of self-knowledge. So also in this chapter 18, verse 11, Krishna is going to say, action cannot indeed be entirely relinquished by an embodied being, made for the purpose of eulogizing the abandonment of the fruit of the action. So, you get the idea. He's trying to sell this to Arjuna, and he has to throw in those words to make him feel like he's one of the gang, but make him understand that no, you're not the one that goes and sits in a cave and meditates, because you've never done that your whole life and you were never good at it, so you're not going to be good at it now. You do your dharma, which is something else. And then Jnaneshwar's commentary is really nice. Some are not able to abandon attachment to the fruits of their actions. Well, that's pretty much all of us, right? So they say that all actions are fettering. That's a bit of a severe step to take just from the fact you can't relinquish the fruits of the actions. Why stop all actions, right? And so Jnaneshwar is kind of making fun of these people. He says, this is like a person running around wildly in a naked condition, calling those who chide him as quarrelsome. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Well, you're naked. Well, you want? What's wrong with that? It's like, well, excuse me. Or it's like one affected with a disease, but having no control whatsoever over his tongue, and finds fault with the food itself. That chocolate cake jumped in my mouth. What's wrong? He's so mean. You don't have any self-control. No, that's not the problem. Or one with leprosy, instead of resenting his own skin, gets angry with the flies on his skin. In that way, the weak ones, greedy for results and unable to relinquish those results, condemn activeness itself as being wicked and declare their decision in favor of complete relinquishment of actions themselves. In other words, they're not strong enough to relinquish, so they say, no, we shouldn't do all these things, because if I do them, I'm going to get attached to them. Well, that's the problem, right? We have to get over that one to be real sannyasis, whether it means the robes or householder sannyasis. Some others declare that sacrifices, etc., should necessarily be performed, since there are no other means for securing purification of the mind. Now we're getting closer. They add that those keen on having speedy success in mental purification should never be idle regarding activity. That sounds more like Amma. One wishing to purify gold must undergo the trouble of passing it through the furnace. If one wants to have the mirror cleaned, he must use a greater amount of ash for polishing it. Even today, when people want to clean something, they use ash from the fire. It works pretty well. Should one desire to have clean clothes, he must not mind the laundry kettle as unclean. In the old days, they used to boil water and wash the clothes in a big pot like that. In that way, actions should not be neglected because they cause suffering. Could delicacies be available always without cooking and boiling them? Some people bolster up their activity indulging in such talk. Owing to difference of opinion, the subject of relinquishment, means Thiaga, has become controversial. So even 750 years ago, people were confused about this, so we don't have to feel so bad. And then Bhavananda Swami's commentary. He says, when it rains, both the farm and a house under construction get wet. You don't want a house under construction to get poured on it, because you're going to have mold and everything. The effect is good for the farmer, in other words, and bad for the latter, bad for the house under construction. The cause here, in the form of rain, has both good and bad effects on two different things. The burning of a lamp, which is the cause, produces a good effect for a reader of the Bhagavad Gita, and a bad effect on the insects that fall in the flame and perish. In life, there is a good effect if we dedicate it to the adoration of God, and a bad effect if we harm others. Potential detriment is thus inherent in all actions. A third set of sages, who take note of the harm contained in karma, advocate its complete abandonment. They are for liquidating mundane life as quickly as possible. Some go to the extent of enforcing slow suicide with the noble intention of not adding to the existing evil. So this commentary doesn't judge the people and their standpoints. He's just saying this is what they're saying. And now he's going to talk about a fourth group of sages without saying that it's his choice, but I think we'll all realize. A fourth group of sages is in favor of persisting in the performance of yajna, which means sacrifices, whether it's a physical one or just a mental one. Dana means giving gifts and giving to other people. And tapas, which is austerities, which is all of sadhana. Persisting in the performance of yajna, dana, and tapas, even though they are fraught with harm. Because if you do it the wrong way, or you might hurt somebody in the process, we don't know. There's always potential. The plea of these wise ones is that the evil of mundane life cannot be eradicated completely. Let life be accepted for what it is worth. As much good as possible may be derived even from this defective existence. The rose is nestled amid thorns, but on that ground the growing of roses should not be banned, right? Poison is bad, no doubt, but a beneficial medicine may be extracted even from that deadly material. Karma or action is undoubtedly detrimental. It binds us in bondage to material existence, which is called prakriti. If you remember chapter 7. It binds us in bondage to material existence and to the wheel of birth and death. Doesn't sound good. Still, by converting karma into the acts of yajna, dana, and tapas, maximum good may be obtained from it. That means, that's why Amma says puja manobhava, because puja is yajna. It's the same thing pretty much. The meaning is that in this context. So if we turn our whole life into a puja or a yajna, then we benefit and the world benefits. We benefit spiritually, not materially, and the world benefits because of peace and the selflessness that we're trying to attain. So, after hearing all these commentaries, don't get confused. This is just Krishna providing the opinions of others, where sannyasa is renunciation of action, not renunciation of everything, and Thiaga is renunciation of the results of actions. So it's kind of divided into two generally in the ancient times. Sannyasa means you don't do anything, basically. And Thiaga is means you relinquish the fruits of whatever actions you do. And one is karma Thiaga. Karma here means actions of any kind. You're supposed to just sit and meditate all day long. And the other is karma phala Thiaga. So in the case of the relinquishing the fruits of actions, obviously householders are doing things and they only have to relinquish the benefit that they would get from that. And this verse itself cites two different opinions to these points. Complete renunciation of actions means not even the daily rituals and all that, just to avoid creating the feeling of doership. That's the reason why they say you shouldn't do anything. And renunciation of nishiddha and kamya actions only. So some people say don't do anything, just bathe, meditate, japa all day long, and then, wait for someone to bring you some food. Like that. Literally, that's how it used to be. And then other people say that no, you can do, everything that you should do as a human being. You can, build yourself a home. You can do things that are not injurious to anybody, but you can't have selfish actions where you're hurting others or any kind of harmful actions to others or the world. So it's a debate about whether it's complete renunciation of actions or partial renunciation of actions. It's not about Thiaga per se. Now, how do we know which one is right? We have to go appeal to a higher being, and that's Amma. So I found a beautiful quote from Eternal Wisdom, and I really suggest that you might want to go through it. It's volume 1, page 315. And a householder devotee asked Amma, you always talk about the importance of Thiaga, sacrifice, renunciation. What is Thiaga? Okay, good question. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out here. Amma says, son, every act performed without regard to one's own comfort or interest is Thiaga. Simple. You don't need all these complicated debates. Amma calls any action Thiaga. This is Amma still talking. If it is done as an offering to God, as a yajna, for the benefit of the world, without the sense of I or mine, that is tough, and disregarding one's own comfort. But pretty much that's what you do in Amritapuri every day. And when you're in ashram here, to a lesser degree, but it's still the base principle. And then she says, the struggle one undergoes for one's own benefit is not Thiaga. And then the devotee gets worried. Would you explain that a little bit more, Amma? Amma says, well, when our child is sick, we take it to the hospital. We'll walk to the hospital if necessary, even if it's far away. We're ready to fall at the feet of any number of people to get the child admitted to the hospital. And if the hospital rooms are full, we're ready to sleep on the dirty floor with the child. This is India. And but the American or Western version of that is also quite vivid in our minds. We will take leave from work for many days to stay with the child, but all this struggle is for the sake of our own child. So it cannot be called Thiaga. Sorry. People give up sleep and they work late to get overtime pay. These are also not Thiaga. But if we sacrifice all our comforts and come to the aid of someone else, that is Thiaga. And with the money we have earned, through a lot of struggle, we help a poor fellow human being. That is Thiaga. The neighbor's child is sick and none of the family can stay with him in the hospital. If you remain with that child expecting nothing in return from anyone, not even a smile, that qualifies as Thiaga. If we reduce our expenses by foregoing some personal convenience and use the savings from it for some righteous purpose, that is Thiaga. Wow. That's what we need to hear, right? It's just a textbook for it. Through such acts of sacrifice, we knock on the door of the Atman, the Self. And through such actions, we gain entry into the world of the Atman. This is Karma Yoga. You didn't even know you were doing that, right? Other actions performed with an attitude of I and mine lead only to death. Spiritual death. When we see a friend after a long time, we may give him a bouquet of flowers, but we are the ones who enjoy its beauty and fragrance first. The gratification of giving is also ours. In the same way, we automatically derive happiness and contentment from our selfless acts of Thiaga. Children, even if someone engaged in acts of Thiaga Children, even if someone engaged in acts of Thiaga doesn't find time for japa, he will still attain the immortal state. His life will benefit others like nectar. A life filled with Thiaga is the greatest form of satsang, for others can see and emulate it. You taught us that. Thus, Krishna has given three things. Thiaga as the renunciation of the fruits of our actions, and then a partial renunciation of actions, and total renunciation of actions. But what is Lord Krishna's view on this topic? Now, Krishna will give his own opinion in the next verses. And here, as an introduction to the next verse, Jnaneshwar has a little introduction to give. Speaking as Krishna, he says, to strip it of all doubts and to make the subject of sannyasa quite definite, I propose discussing it in clear terms. Now hear it. Verse 4. Nischayam sranu me tatra tyage bharata sattama tyago hi purusha vyagra Trividha Samprakirtitaha. Together, slowly. Nischayam sranu me tatra Tyage bharata sattama Tyago hi purusha vyagra Trivida samprakirtitaha. Arjuna, hear from me the final truth about Tyaga. For Tyaga has been declared to be of three kinds. Shankaracharya gives clarification, saying that relinquishment, Tyaga, the Lord has used the word Tyaga here, implying that the sense expressed by the words Tyaga and Sannyasa is one and the same. Like we said earlier, he just uses them interchangeably, which means, to him they're the same thing. And then Krishna also says, Shankaracharya also says in short, the three kinds of relinquishment apply only to a non-self-realized person, not in the case of one who perceives the supreme truth. So he's saying, you don't have to tell this to someone who's got realized. This is, information for people who are yet to be realized. Therefore, nobody other than myself, Krishna, is competent to speak about the truth concerning the subject. You don't just go around asking just anybody about this question. The person has to be free from all illusion and from Maya. Then Jnaneshwar, I'll give a little bit of his commentary and more of Chidbhavananda Swami's commentary because I feel it kind of helps us a lot. But first, Jnaneshwar, he says, Tyaga is threefold, and I now describe to you their different indications. In the next verse, probably. Even though there are three kinds of relinquishment, bear well in mind that the gist of all is only this. I am the all-knowing, and you first hear what is the definite and firm essence according to my intellect. The seeker who wishes to be ever alert regarding their liberation should wholly conduct himself realizing fully this essence of relinquishment. So he's like, don't listen to all these stories, that different versions, standpoints, just listen to what I have to say and do it. That's the hard part, doing it. I can listen, but I can't always do it, right? Okay. And then the last bit of commentary from Swami Chidbhavananda. The words sannyasa and tyaga are synonyms. Both the words mean abandonment, renunciation, and the act of giving up. And this is the part that everybody needs to hear. It is not a negative process born of frustration and failure in life, as some believe. In renunciation, there is fulfillment as well as acceptance. It is an act of giving up the lower after one's concern with it is successfully over, and embracing the higher with greater responsibility and keener application. Renunciation is both the key and the basis for higher life. All good and purposeful acts in nature are acts of renunciation. We shall now see how they are so. All these similes are so beautiful coming up. The sun is constantly giving its heat and light, thereby facilitating the life process. The idea is that it doesn't get anything back from us in return. A ripe fruit renounces the parent tree that has sustained it, so that it may fulfill itself elsewhere. A mother nurtures a baby in her womb as part of herself, but she delivers it at the right time, which is best for both herself and the baby. This is an act of renunciation, though we do not call it so. In time, a student must renounce the school that has been educating him. While availing himself of the benefits of that school, his aim is to get out of it successfully. The aim of the individual soul, or Jivatman, is to get educated in the school of this world, Prakriti, and then to renounce it so he can fulfill himself by uniting with the Paramatma. This is the pinnacle of renunciation, towards which beings are knowingly or unknowingly making their way. It is the yogi who expedites the progress while the others are lingering in the wilderness of material existence. Which one do we want to be? We can choose that mentally, but living up to it is the challenge that we're all facing. So what is going to be Krishna's view? First, Krishna is not going to distinguish between sannyasa and Thiaga because he feels that they are one and the same, and it was a wrong question anyhow. Therefore, in the following verses, Krishna will use both words indiscriminately. In one place, he will say sannyasa, another place he will say Thiaga, and then he comes back to sannyasa. It means he doesn't see any difference between them. Then the next question is whether Krishna agrees with total renunciation of action or partial renunciation of action. And obviously we know what Amma would say, so Krishna is also of the second opinion, partial renunciation, making it a kind of householder sannyasa, which is basically what's going on in Amrita Puri. You know, wow, Amma initiated 260 people in 2020. But how many more devotees are there? There's like millions, tens of millions of devotees out there that are not renunciates. So whose life is more important in this case when Amma is giving her teachings? She has to give the teachings for the majority of people. And that's exactly what Krishna is doing too. Remember, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has only described sannyasa in the context of remaining in household life, which is called gauna sannyasa. Gauna sannyasa means like figurative sannyasa. It's not the literal one, but figuratively you're living a sannyasi's life. Literal sannyasa means the total renunciation described in the Vedas, which is even more strict than what we see around Amma, because she herself is highly active. For our sake, she's showing us an example. We can assume that Amma's way is the need of the day, since Amma wouldn't do so otherwise. In the old days, sannyasis were the only beggars, but now there are so many hungry people in the world, the need of the day is not more beggars, but more givers, more servants, more compassionate people, etc. And since the Gita was given by Lord Krishna at the beginning of Kali Yuga, we can really assume that this teaching incorporates somewhat of a revisionist approach that is suitable for the degradation of society foretold about the age of Kali Yuga. You know, in the Puranas and some other scriptures, they talked about Kali Yuga, what it's going to look like. And so knowing that, Krishna may have poised his teaching to guide people into that era, which is going to continue for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's like the saving grace until Amma came. Now we have Amma to save everybody, in addition to Krishna's teachings. In his commentary, Shankaracharya provided another angle on the matter. If one asks why Krishna interprets sannyasa as only partial, not complete, Shankaracharya answers that because Krishna is addressing those who are not ready for true sannyasa, the people who are still in the process of purifying themselves. Really, that includes us too. But in Shankaracharya's eye, Krishna is giving a different version than the traditional one. And Shankaracharya was surrounded by a lot of strict abiders of the Vedic teachings, so probably it was necessary for him to put it that way so they could understand. But in the case of those who are not yet fully ready, gauna samnyasa, or figurative samnyasa, is prescribed here. Please note, like we say in future verses, like next week, we're going to see this confusion of, not confusion, but synonymous usage of Thiaga and Sannyasa. Now what about this threefold renunciation? What is that all about? Is that going to be full abandonment or partial abandonment of actions? Or is it going to be the relinquishment of the fruits of actions? And regarding this, we will understand in the next verses. And for the next verse, Swami Chidbhavananda has a little introduction. The goal of the Jivatman is to be emancipated from Prakriti, this world, which expresses itself in the form of karma. But one cannot and should not forcefully abandon actions. There is a natural and harmonious way of transcending karma, which is presented as follows. And we're going to find out some of that in the next verse. Verse 5. Yajna dana tapa karma natyajam karyamevata yajnodanam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Now together slowly. Yajna dana tapa karma natyajam karyam evatat yajnodanam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. The work of sacrifice, charity, and austerity should not be given up, but should indeed be performed, for they are purifying for the wise. So just deleted the it, because it didn't show up in the original, and I added for the wise because I didn't see it in the, I think it's missing here. Okay. Now we'll look at the commentaries. Just one little bit from Shankaracharya, and then there will be lot from Jnaneshwar and lot from Chidbhavananda Swami. So Shankaracharya, the only clarification that I took from that is that to the wise, or for the wise, means those who have no desire for the fruits. So it's a beautiful way of calling somebody wise. We are all wise if we have no desire for the fruits of our actions. And Amma says it another way. She says, we don't know whether we're going to get the results anyhow that we wanted, so it's smarter to not count on that. If it comes, good. If it doesn't, it's okay. And she says, and that's why we need God's grace so much. So if you really want it, you have to pray for grace, or act in a way that you will deserve grace. Jnaneshwar says, one should not relinquish yajna, dana, and tapas, which are all necessary actions, in the way a wayfarer, a traveler, wishing to reach his destination should not stop taking steps forward. If you don't walk forward, you're not going to get there, right? The search of a thing lost should not be given up until it is found. Or one should not push aside his dish until his hunger is satisfied. One should not get out of a boat he is rowing until he reaches the bank. A banana tree should not be cut down until it bears fruit, or a light should not be extinguished before finding what they are looking for. In that way, one should not be indifferent to yajna, so long as he is not definite within himself about self-knowledge. So the beautiful thing is that yajna and all these actions are to purify us. And if you're not clear about you being the Atman, it's not time to stop. You have to keep going, because it means you need more purification. Instead, he should continue performing yajna, dana, and tapas with ardent application to the extent he is capable. That's the kind of Amma talk we're looking for, right? You should do it more, because it's not for you and it's going to purify you. And then he turns it to like a positive conversation, saying, the faster one walks, the closer comes the time to rest. In that way, Full effort in actions becomes useful in attaining the actionless state. Isn't that beautiful? I want to read it again. In that way, full effort in actions becomes useful in attaining the state of actionlessness. The greater readiness one shows for taking medicines, the greater one secures freedom from this disease. In that way, the more speedily and carefully actions are performed, the more effectively and totally rajas and tamas get wiped out. The more acid coatings are given to gold, the faster the alloy is destroyed, making the gold very pure. In that way, the performance of actions with firm faith wipes out rajas and tamas, bringing within easy view the temple of the purity of sattva, purity, so righteousness also. Therefore, actions come up to the level of holy water. So your actions are holy water, and secure the purity of righteousness. The literal holy waters, like you get from the Ganges, washes out the external filth, while actions, selfless actions, brighten the interior. So it's even greater than the Ganges water. Thus, only right actions are fit to be called pure holy waters. Wow. It is like a thirsty person in a wasteland being provided with amritam, ambrosia, or the eyes of a blind one beholding the luster of the sun, or the river itself running to the rescue of one getting drowned, or the very earth sustaining a person about to fall, or death itself prolonging the longevity of one on the verge of demise. In that way, karma yoga itself rescues the seekers from the bondage of action. So all of these similes seem to be contradictory, but he's saying, no, they're not. You think it's going to increase the problem, but it's actually going to fix the problem. So we have to look at it that way. And Chidbhavananda Swami has some beautiful similes as well. He says, the caterpillar builds a cocoon for its further development and evolution. But it does that only to bring about the required change. In the seeming imprisonment, it transforms itself from the larva into a beautiful butterfly. At this stage, it must come out to fulfill its true purpose, flying free in the air and pollinating all the plants. For this, it must break open the cocoon that it itself created. The act of breaking the cocoon is as important as that of building it. Our position in the world is exactly like that of the caterpillar in the cocoon. The variety of desire-prompted actions that we perform are for our self-education and self-preparation. By experience, at last we come to know the limitations of mundane life. Over time, an attitude of detachment from earthly existence develops within us. We get established in the truth that our real home is God, and that we are here only for training. Once we gain this conviction, whatever actions we do transform into yajna. They transform into dana, into tapas. As the butterfly breaks through the cocoon it built, the sadhak breaks through the shackles of earthly life by his performance of sacrifice, gift, and austerity. The entire world stands to gain by this. So in this verse and the following one, Krishna is talking about the importance of yajna, danam, and tapa. And in the two verses after that, it's going to be about the three types of sannyasa. Again, you guessed it, it's going to be sattva, rasa, rajas, and tamas in verses 7 and 9. Now, these three, 5, 6, so 2 verses about the importance of yajna, danam, and tapas. And why does Krishna have to emphasize them? Because it is necessary for him to emphasize their importance as a justification for his focus on partial karma sannyasa without even a mention about total karma sannyasa. He's not going to say anything about total renunciation of actions because that's just not on his radar. he just talks about partial, and this is his reason why, because he's going to say, look, these things, yajna, dana, and tapas are necessary. There's no way to get around that. So he focuses on that in these two verses. So what is Amma's version of yajna, dana, and tapas? I found another quote from her, which puts all three of them together in one quote. And sorry, I forgot to note the citation. But I think it's in Awakened Children. A kind of yajna takes place when we do something selfless for others without the least expectation. We are giving something, and as a result, we become more expansive. We experience the feeling that the self in us is the self in all, which is the goal of all spiritual practices. Selfless service can feel like tapas, but it is actually helping us to come closer to total expansiveness. We forget ourselves when we perform any action selflessly with the proper attitude, the attitude of yajna bhava. Amma says puja mano bhava. That's the same as yajna bhava. It's just the idea that my whole life is a yajna or is a puja. In each one of us, there is the seed of spirituality. When it is watered with the waters of compassion towards others, then the seed germinates and eventually grows into a tree, giving shade to others. Traditionally, a householder's life goes hand in hand with these three things, yajna, dana, tapas, which means sacrifice of some kind, offerings and giving things to people, and tapas or austerities. And even if it's not a tradition, it's the reality of a householder's life. So if we drop them, in those days it was equivalent to dropping householder life entirely, because they're compulsory, or at least they were, in a more formal way. Now it's kind of haphazardly, like he said in a previous verse in the commentary. So they're compulsory, at least in some form. It could be small, humble, it doesn't matter. It's not the length, but the sincerity and the attitude. Even 5 minutes of prayer qualifies as the yajna if it's done sincerely. And no sincere person can say that they don't have any time. A donation doesn't have to be a big amount. Nobody can say that they cannot spare $1, a few kind words, a few 5 minutes or so to listen to someone who's in trouble or who's sad, or just a warm smile. You can't afford a warm smile, why not? It's the attitude that matters. And the tapas doesn't need to be severe. You don't have to walk on fire or anything like that. It's the discipline that matters. Just 1 minute of silent contemplation a few times a day. Reducing food intake maybe once a week. It's not like you have to fast and not even drink water. Just reduce it a little bit and see how that feels. Reducing sleep or comforts once a week. It's not the end of the world. We can do it however we can. Just that discipline itself is so beautiful. And over time, these efforts will gradually convert our whole life into a yajna, an offering, and an embodiment of discipline. Why? Because, Krishna says in the verse, they are purifying for the wise. So it doesn't happen all at once, but if we inculcate those habits in ourselves, then he says, yes, it will purify you because you have made a wise choice. The opposite is also true. If a householder's life is devoid of such efforts, it becomes a boring drudgery, full of conflict, selfishness, and indifference. There is also no chance for spiritual growth, that's for sure. The only thing that the family shares besides the same roof is similar fears of the future. Naturally, if one becomes fully purified by yajna, dana, and tapas, the purifying sadhanas are no longer necessary, strictly speaking. Just like we take like a shower only when we need to, when we're dirty. And a clean person does not need to bathe if he's not dirty. Similarly, once the mind is purified, yajna, dana, and tapas are no longer compulsory. But of course, we know that Amma still recognizes the importance of these to set an example. She never stops these. Because people say, oh, Amma didn't do it, so I'm going to take it easy. She's trying to show us that this is how serious we have to be about our spiritual growth. Now, let's say somebody is already pure. What is their goal? It's certainly not purity because they're already pure. But it is self-knowledge. And how does one get there from here? Where we are, like we're trying to purify ourselves, and then we think, what happens later? Well, not a whole lot changes because we still have to apply ourselves in studying the teachings and clarifying their meaning and all these things, but it takes a little bit difference. The yajna that one would perform for your ancestors or for yourself or for whatever you want to have in your life, instead of that, you just say, my yajna is going to learn. I'm going to read scriptures. I'm going to listen to my guru's teachings. I'm going to read the scriptures. I'm going to try to understand them. And if I don't understand them, then my dhanam becomes mananam, which means the constant contemplation and that yearning to clarify the import of those teachings. It's not like you read Awakened Children once and say, okay, I'm done. You go back, I mean, that's what we do normally, right? You go back and you say, wait a second, I read this 2 years ago. Did I really understand it? Now, because I've had a lot of experiences since then, and you know what? Now I get it much more deeply. So we have to go back to these always. That's why when you quote-unquote finish a scripture, you never stop with the last verse. You come back to the first verse and chant that, or maybe a few more verses at the beginning, because the belief is that you never finish reading and studying the scriptures. It's constant. So that is a kind of dhanam. It's a gift of your time, of going through those teachings and how do I put this into practice? And that kind of contemplation is mananam. And finally, the tapas becomes nididhyasanam, which is constantly contemplating on those teachings. That was supposed to come at the end rather than the mananam, sorry. So mananam is clarifying the import of the teachings based on your experience over time, and nididhyasam is constantly contemplating on those teachings until it becomes one with you. And for the next verse, Jnaneshwar and Chidbhavananda have their own introductions. Jnaneshwar first. I now explain to you in the best way possible that process by which the bondage of actions is removed by action itself. And then Chidbhavananda Swami says, how do the wise ones maintain their purity by performing these noble acts? The clarification comes next week. So we will stop the verses here, and we have a few minutes left to address some of the questions that have come since the middle of June. Took me a little while. So, a long time ago, literally, it's 3 months ago, a person asked for access to some of the earlier Gita classes, and yes, I saw that last week, and I intended to attend to that, but I couldn't do so. I'm very sorry, and I will make sure that you send your email address, and so we'll send those links out to you soon. Thank you for your patience. And then one person has sent one question with 5 questions. So we'll get as far as we can go. The first question is, when doing puja, why does the left hand hold the right elbow, like when you're doing something? My understanding is that it's just a gesture of respect. Literally, you really want to feel like, you're showing respect, and it's a gesture. It's also a gesture at the same time. But in your heart, you're really, I need 2 hands to do this. It's so important. We're trying to be gentle, and we're trying to be completely focused on that action. That's my understanding. And their second question was, why does Amma often ignore people, devotees and disciples? And they have some commentary on that. I'm not going to go into that. But why does Amma do this, is the question. From my standpoint, I would say it's just mere perception. And it's kind of a sign of that we need to really look at Amma's being in a deeper way. In reality, a realized master doesn't ignore anyone, nor do they give more attention to anyone, because they are equally connected with everybody. We should never forget that. If we have to get all of our spiritual sustenance from Amma personally, directly, it's going to make our spiritual life quite difficult. Knowing that Amma is always there and having that faith is the better approach, but still, let's try to respond to this. There are times when, for some circumstance, Amma will spend time with a person for a longer time than usual. Maybe for many people, she might give attention to many people. So, we go on tour with Amma, and like in Japan, I'm sometimes near Amma for a long time, and she hardly looks at me. But if something happens and I'm necessary, I do something. That's all it is. And then the whole day, she might hardly talk with her, even though I'm right there. But I'm happy because all these Japanese people or foreigners living in Japan, they're getting a chance to meet Amma. That makes me happy. So it's not really the look and the affection and attention we get from her, but how we can help her do what she's trying to do. It really doesn't matter either way, whether we get attention or not, because coming closer, because each person has the freedom to become closer to Amma if they try. So if you stand back or you just only go there once a year or once every few weeks or months, and you see Amma and you're expecting to get a lot of attention, that may not happen. You can exercise your free will and say, Amma, I'm right here, And then it's okay, because Amma likes people to be straightforward. You have to discard your shyness, you have to discard your fears and your self-consciousness. You just have to dive right in and say, look, I want you to look at me. That's okay. She'll laugh, and every time after that, she's going to look at you. I remember there was a devotee who came on the housing project in 2003 or 2004. He was a Spanish guy. Really, he had this kind of uncanny relationship with Amma. He was kind of cute because he was innocent, even though he was an adult. And he was always thinking of what to say to Amma. Just so innocent. And then he had been away from Amma for about a month because he came with us on the housing project, and he had to do some other things, I think. So he was gone for a while, and then he was about to leave. The project was almost over, and he asked me, can you teach me how to say something to Amma when I go back? And I said, okay. And then I thought about it, because I knew his personality, so I said, in Malayalam, I taught him how to say something, and that was, Amme, enne കാണാത്തതിന് വിഷമമുണ്ടായിരുന്നോ? And he practiced it, and he went to Amritapuri, and he said it in front of Amma. And she laughed so hard, and she was like playing with him after that. And I wasn't there, but I was happy that it worked. Because the meaning was, Amma, were you sad that I wasn't here? And she said, oh yeah, I was really, really, lonely all day long because you weren't here. But those kind of interactions, you'll never forget. And Amma will always think that it's, very childlike and innocent. Maybe let's try to answer one more. If this is a person's last life and they're going to merge with the Supreme, how long does it take to merge? Is it immediate, or do they still need to go through a process before that full merging is complete? Well, you could go back to chapter 8, if you had access to the videos. I'm trying to get those up. Anyhow, I'll tell you what it says in the class, and you can also look for it later. If one has atma-jnana, if you have self-realization, in other words, you leave your body at the time of self-realization, that's videha moksha, or videsha mukti, and the other version is you are God-realized, like someone like Ramana Maharishi. While you're alive, you become realized and you live a long life after that. Whichever it is, at the time you leave your body, if you have self-knowledge, atma-jnana, merging with the Supreme is immediate. Otherwise, it is said that in a different dimension, it's said that if a person is really worthy of this, and that's a whole other story, but let's say the person is worthy of it, then he or she goes to a different dimension, not the same dimension as earth. The jivatma of the departed soul must go through a process of learning, clarifying, and meditation, shravana, manana, and nididhyasana, on self-realization. So whatever you didn't do on earth, that's a homework assignment that you have to do in another world, another dimension. And we cannot say how long that takes because time is different in different dimensions. But basically, one way or another, there's no merging with the Supreme without self-knowledge, without atma-jnana. So don't worry about it. It's not going to be a problem that you're going to have on earth, okay? Because it's, the assumption is that you left the body. So until then, let's just make very diligent efforts. Okay, one more question I can answer. This person's mother died in her sleep, and her father was not conscious at the time of her death. And she says, my grandmother. Maybe it was her grandmother, I'm not sure. Anyhow, a family member died in their sleep, and this person is saying that they remember that in the chapter 6, it says that the last thought is going to determine your next birth, but this person had dementia, very old, and was sleeping. So what kind of a next birth is she going to get? Well, if we follow those teachings at the end of chapter 6, the destiny of this person, whether this mother or grandmother, that will be determined by the dream she was having at that time. And even if she didn't have a dream, then it would have been, there's no thoughts, right? And deep sleep. So whatever the last thought before that, that's what would determine the next birth. It is this teaching about your last thought being determining the next birth is sometimes not taken literally. It's nice to think that way because it makes us feel like I have to always think of God, always think of Amma. But if let's pretend there's no controversy about this verse and we're just going to take it as is. It would be the thought that she had in her dreams, because that's also thoughts. It's just a question of conscious thoughts and unconscious thoughts. And even if they have dementia, the thoughts come on their own due to their importance to the departing one without any effort. You've heard of people saying, like, I almost died and my life flashed before my eyes. It's not like you say, okay, now I'm going to think about my whole life all at once. It just happens on its own. But what comes to people at that moment is the most important things in their life, that are the most important things to them in their life. So if we want to make sure that we go to Amma or merge in Amma, we have to think about her all the time and make her the most important thing in our life. You know, an elderly person with dementia, you know, it might be one of their family members, you know, who knows, it could be their pet or something like that. But it doesn't mean that a problem is going to take place. What should take place would have taken place. Okay. We have one more, two more, three more questions which we'll address next week. So for today, we will close the formal part of the text, and we will, those who have time, you can remain with us and meditate for some time. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Those of you who have more time, please join us for a brief meditation. Close your eyes, please. Check your posture. And slow down your breathing process. With each inhalation and exhalation, feel your body and mind relax further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you, as though you were in her embrace already. Feel her presence filling up your heart and your whole being. Now shift your awareness to the peaceful and harmonious flow of your breathing. The breathing process feels like a peaceful stream flowing. And you are simply watching that stream as the air flows in and out. As we focus on the breath, the more and more our mind becomes subtle. As the mind becomes subtler and subtler, it becomes easier for us to visualize. Now visualize some of the important moments of your day today. You must have done certain things, or maybe talked with somebody. You may have prepared something, completed something, forgotten something. Those important moments of this day, try to visualize how they would have been if your mind was not attached personally to the outcome, the results, or the fruits, as Krishna said. If we relinquish our attachment to that outcome or the fruits, what would those situations have looked like today? We can also visualize tomorrow, not to create anxiety or fear or anything like that, but Let's say we know we have to do something tomorrow. What would tomorrow look like if we practice this teaching of relinquishing attachment, personal attachment, to the results, the fruits, the results? You still have to be sincere in all the actions, but we're not going to cling to those outcomes that the mind wants. Let us visualize a peaceful, internally peaceful day tomorrow, and try to relinquish any preconceived notions about the outcomes, and hopefully we can welcome the morning with a light heart and a positive attitude. Now let us chant the final prayer before we close. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can open your eyes if you wish. Om Amriteshwariya Namaha. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next week again. Namaskar.